One thing I want to talk about is cell turnover. And I was thinking about this as I was trying to re-explain the idea of fat loss to somebody, because we talked about fat, being liberated into the bloodstream, and then and maybe not even being used to lose, right? You use it for energy, but you're not losing body fat because you're storing it again. And I think that really speaks to cell turnover. So just like in protein, in fat, in bone, your body's constantly turning over. It's breaking down cells and rebuilding them, breaking down tissue and rebuilding it. It's to correct errors, it's to repair, it's to keep things healthy. Because if things last too long, they tend to disintegrate in some way. They degenerate. They do not act in the best way when they're getting old, right? So your body's constantly turning over. Some cells turn over much quicker than others. Stomach lining, for example, your skin, these things turn over pretty quickly, whereas other cells take longer to replenish and to regenerate. But here's a great example: bone density. Bone density is this sort of balance between building bone and breaking bone, building bone, breaking bone. And it's this net effect, right? Think about it. You're adding to your bone, let's say you're adding 10 parts, and then you're destroying 10 parts. Adding 10 parts, destroying 10 parts. Your bone is balanced at that point. It's not building and it's not losing. There's things that you can do to help build more bone, and there's things that you can technically do that to generate bone, right? And we'll talk about it in the future. Same thing goes for protein. Think about the protein sink idea we've talked about. Your body is always turning over. It's always getting rid of protein. Unless the protein is coming into your body to build it back up again, it's not going to be able to regenerate and rebuild to the level it needs to. So you want to fill this sink as quickly or more quickly than it is emptying itself. Because if it gets below that line, your body's deciding, hey, we don't really need this. Let's forget about this. Let's put our effort somewhere else. So just like bone, your protein and your muscles are turning over and building and rebuilding, right? And for that reason, you have to make sure you're taking in the right macronutrients, right? Fat is another example. Your body's always breaking down fat and building fat, storing fat. The net effect is what ends up happening. So like, is it more building more or losing more? Are you gaining or you're losing fat? Now between those 2 points, there's that balance. And what's happening is, if you are using fat as a fuel and not replenishing it in any way, then your body's going to have a net spending effect on fat, right? You're spending more fat than you're taking in. So that net balance is exiting, leaving, losing body fat. Now it's possible to lose and gain at the same level where you never see any change in body fat, because you're replenishing what you're losing, right? You're replenishing what's being liberated into the cell, into the bloodstream. But your body's always breaking down and building. It's always turning over. It's always storing it here, taking it away from there, storing it here, taking it away from there. It's going back and forth. It's always regulating, and that's a good thing, right? And this is another example is glucose. Like, it's not the same as the others, but your body is liberating glucose from the cells, using the energy and storing it back in. So for example, it's storing glycogen, is the sugar that's in your muscles, to make sure that when you're ready to quickly move, that immediate action is used, you're using glucose, right? The whole point of me talking about cell turnover is to realize that it's this net effect. If you're not doing the right things, you'll tend to be burning more than you need, let's say muscle or bone. We're not replenishing it, so you're losing muscle, you're losing bone. Or where it comes to fat, maybe you're storing more than you want to for whatever your goal is. So you want to remember, you want to do things that help to take advantage of your physiology and maximize the muscle growth, the protein intake, the fat loss, the bone building, and the use of sugar so it's not floating around damaging any cells. So that was a quick introduction to cell turnover.